Hi, I'm Joe Mosher, and I'm a results leader.
You're listening to ResultsLeader.fm. Being a thought leader is easy. Getting results is hard. This show is for the results leader who lives and dies by their results. Here is your host and Chief Results Leader, Jonathan Rivera.
Yes, y'all. It is time once again for another ResultsLeader.fm. This is the only show on the internet dedicated to the consultants who are getting results for their clients. Today's interview is going to be a fun one. We're going to find out how solving the wrong problems could cost you years of hard work and frustration. Why working on your blind spots might be the perfect solution to becoming a bigger thinker and getting better results, and how some mergers and acquisitions destroy more value than they create. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Joe Mosher. He is a mergers and acquisition specialist for agribusinesses. Let's jump in. Joe, welcome to the show. Are you ready to rock this thing?
Jonathan, I am ready. I am caffeinated. Let's go.
Let's do this. Well, our listeners always value a quick win. So what book have you given most as a gift?
It's a bit heady, but the book that I've most oftenly given to clients and colleagues is called Nature's Metropolis. It's a book that really unpacks some of the economic and scientific innovations that help address real-world issues like de-risking ag for farmers. How did we get a uniform rail system across the U.S.? How did we get to industrial scale production of animals, lumber markets, et cetera, and just really highlights the symbiotic relationship between farm and factory and urban and rural and forest and finance, and just really unpacks a lot of why we have the systems we have today, the complexity of those systems, and how they came to be.
Wow, Nature's Metropolis, first time we ever hear of it, and thank you for that. Now
it is a doorstop of a book. So
it's story time. I want you to think back and tell us a story of how an apparent failure set you up for later success.
Yeah, so about a decade ago, I was tasked with moving to a different business, a regional business within one of the divisions of a multinational that I was working for. And the story with the assignment was that it was a sound business, good processes, capable people who knew their jobs, and they had kind of plateaued, and really we just needed to reinvent the challenge. And so in undertaking that, I went in, I developed a vision for what I felt the business could look like. I developed a plan for how we might reinvent that challenge. I got the buy-in for how we were going to level up the business and grow. But the reality on the ground was quite different. And the business was in rough shape. I would say it was bordering on crisis in some respects. Some roles had been open for too long. Performance had allowed to slip. Quality management issues were rampant. And frankly, the external market the conditions had changed such that what had been very favorable for a number of years now was pretty strong headwinds. And in the midst of that, it was really hard to maintain profitability. So the reality on the ground was it was really more of a turnaround than reinvent the challenge. So as the operational and financial challenges mounted and there was pressure from upper management for us to right the course, I would say blindly just pushed forward with my plan. And really what happened is while I'd conceptually built that consensus around what we needed to do, the problem I was trying to solve didn't match the facts on the ground. And because I lost sight of saying, okay, what is the problem we're looking to solve? The gears started to grind. We weren't getting the progress and results we expected. And my own personal reaction was frankly, I was not at my best. And I probably created an unproductive amount of heartburn and tension in the organization. We eventually got through it. We got the business back to profitability. But what it really reminded me of is, when you're leading a growth business or you're leading an acquisition or you're leading a turnaround, it's all about pulling the right levers at the right time. I spent 2 years pulling the wrong levers at the wrong time and then blaming the transmission for why we weren't going forward. And it's because I had not stayed rooted in what problem are we trying to solve. If the problem you're trying to solve is we've plateaued and we need to reinvent the challenge, that's going to prescribe a certain set of steps. If the problem is this business is in crisis, this is a full rebuild and turnaround, that's a different set of steps. And so I try to carry that with me in my work with clients now is really always defining, redefining, and revisiting on a consistent basis. What's the problem to be solved? And taking the steps appropriately to move forward based on that.
So you went into the business thinking that it was at a plateau and you were going to grow it, get it unstuck, so to speak. You had a game plan for that and you moved ahead with your game plan, even though you realized it wasn't the situation that you were in. So how do you figure out if you are working on, like, give us some practical tips how to figure out if you're working on the correct problem at the correct time?
Well, I think the first thing is just keeping that front of mind. And that was perhaps my biggest failure and the biggest lesson learned there is I never stopped to think about, okay, is the problem that I'm working on the problem that actually is at my fingertips? And so having the presence of mind to sit there and ask yourself that question, to look in the mirror, to talk to the people around you, to get alignment on that is probably the first and most important thing you can do. And being very explicit about it. We eventually had team meetings where we would start every meeting with what is the problem to be solved? Are we actually trying to solve a people problem? Is this a internally focused or self-inflicted error? Or we're trying to fix a broken process? Or are our capabilities no longer suitable to the market that's available to us? And so that's really when I look back, it's not scientific. It's more of just having the presence of mind to say, do you know what you're working on? Is it the right thing? Because I have no doubt that going back, I could have created a lot more engagement. I would have had better work-life balance. We probably would have kept some people, more people than we did, if we had stayed rooted in, okay, this is actually a turnaround, and that's going to require different activities, different focus, different behaviors than let's remotivate, let's relaunch this business, and let's get it going.
What would you say is the most worthwhile investment that you have ever made?
For me, it's just investing time and energy and focus in my blind spots to build business acumen. Really taking the time to make the unfamiliar familiar and trying to make the complex simple. In my work, I support businesses through major transformations and major transactions with M&A. And it requires you to have a strong grasp on all the interrelated and interdependent processes and systems that businesses use to create value. And so taking the time, I'm not a marketer, but taking the time to understand what is a value proposition, what are different marketing channels, what are the ways that you get stakeholder feedback and how you evaluate your own products relative to the marketplace, understanding origination and procurement, understanding manufacturing, finance, risk management, people processes, all the different processes it takes to run a business. Early in my career, I spent a lot of time on the outside looking in for many of these. I was strong in a couple and relatively weak in others. And for me, I never felt comfortable saying, okay, I'm going to do one or two things really well. I want to have a greater grasp of the overall system, the overall business. And that has now allowed me to feel more competent in understanding business models to help clients pick apart where things are not working. And frankly, see how the whole system and business fits together. So you understand if you change one thing, where's that likely to disrupt or improve other parts of the business?
So there are two schools of thoughts that I hear out there. And one of them is lean into what you're great at and just do that and let everything else fall to the wayside. And then there's the school of thought of shoring up, like you said, your blind spots. What made you choose shoring up your blind spots rather than just leaning into the stuff that you were great at?
I'd say it's not binary. So my strong suits are around project management, around post M&A integration activities, around identifying risk in processes, understanding the materiality of that risk, and really helping businesses execute on strategy. So that is my sweet spot. But I also understood that I could do that better, even if I never once run a manufacturing facility in my career. It's probably good for me to understand what are the challenges with procuring raw materials? What does that business's supply chain look like? What is their exposure to Forex if they're buying overseas? Who are they selling into? What does their distribution model look like? I said, okay, I'm going to be strong in my areas, but I need to be familiar and to some degree competent in understanding the other aspects of the business. Otherwise, you get myopic and you might be really great in that one particular area. But if you fail to understand how driving great performance in the sales function is going to pretty quickly outstrip the business's ability to produce the goods the sales function's selling, what value are you creating? And so I don't look at them as binary choices. I try to strike the balance.
What are some bad recommendations you hear in your area of expertise?
Oh, that's an easy one, Jonathan. People say, be careful not to over-engineer your integration process. And so taking a step back, I work with food and agribusiness firms in the small to lower middle market space that are undergoing an acquisition as part of their growth strategy. There's tons of support for finding potential businesses to buy, legal support for structuring the deals, advisory support for getting to price discovery, doing due diligence, closing the transaction, and there's very little support on the back end for the integration. And so I've never once heard of an integration that was over-engineered. They're almost universally probably underappreciated. So if the integration is underappreciated, if the literature on the topic is underweight, which I would say very strongly it is, you can find 1,000 books on M&A, very little on what to do after you own it. And so at the end of the day, the companies that are doing transactions are underwhelmed by the results. And so I would say take the risk of over-engineering it. Chances are you still won't be able to, and you'll get a much more favorable outcome compared to your peers.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program for a public service announcement. We're going to get right back into this show, but I wanted to ask you a question. If you have been listening to the show for any amount of time and you've picked up even one single tip, then I need your help. Get the word out. Tell people about resultsleader.fm. Share it on social media. Share it on your email. Share it anywhere. Hashtag resultsleaderfm. Now let's jump back into the interview. Why do results matter?
I'd be hard pressed to figure out what the alternatives to results are, honestly. Results are the connective tissue between the problem you're trying to solve that we talked about earlier and the value created by solving it. The promises are plentiful. People can make a lot of promises, but results can be pretty hard to come by. And when you have results, that's the evidence of success, and the evidence of success sets you apart. And so, again, coming back to M&A, companies choose to undertake M&A as a means of growing their business. And these acquisitions are high risk, they're high impact, and they have the potential to destroy value far more quickly than they create it. So the results of your activities, the results of that work is the balance between value captured and value lost. So for me personally, results are also incredibly important because results are the basis for referrals. And referrals are the currency of the trade. And so for me, there's nothing more compelling than someone who you know and trust saying, hey, work with this firm. They know what they're doing. They'll get you the results you want. So that's, I don't see what an alternative to results would be.
All I can think about is kids playing baseball with no scoreboard. That's the alternative. Hey, we're just having fun. Okay,
exactly.
Just business.
That works until you're 6, right?
Right. Oh, man. So let's think back. Over the last 5 years, what new realization has helped you get better results for your clients?
The realization that has crystallized for me, and it comes true again and again, is that an executive's desire to hear the truth is far outgunned by their staff's reluctance to give it to them. And, regardless of the culture of an organization, there's often just too much at stake for people to really have the productive candor that leaders need. And when I worked in a large organization, I was victim to the same thing. As much as I might trust and respect a particular vice president or EVP, and that person may have given me the permission to tell them exactly what I thought, there's a moment of hesitation there.
Why?
People's careers might hang in the balance, right? You don't know the mindset of the person that is asking for the feedback, and it's been very rare in my career to see people who can truly take the bad news, particularly if you're in a senior position where it might reflect upon conditions you've created in the business, and somehow not equate the discomfort of that reality with the messenger that put it at your feet. And so I think facts are pretty cheap and everyone has them. Anyone can go in with a PowerPoint and show a bunch of data and charts and et cetera. But so while facts are cheap, perspective commands a premium. And I think as someone who can come in and tell an executive exactly, here's what is going wrong, here's what's going to go wrong, here's where we're weak, here's where we have opportunity to do much better. That's incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I also think that too often as professional advisors, we spend a lot of time asking folks, what problems are you facing and what keeps you up at night? And I think that's a terrible set of questions. If we're good at our job, we should already have a pretty strong point of view on where the problems are and what's keeping them up at night. And if we can help bring that into focus and offer a compelling solution on the backside, the business is better for it, the executive is better for it, and they ultimately appreciate the candor. And again, I have to keep that in mind as I sit with an executive team member, as I sit with a business owner, as I sit with a member of the board. If I have that moment of hesitation of, should I say this thing that I believe very strongly to be true and I believe to be to the long-term benefit of the business? If I hesitate and then don't say it, who's going to? And that's a realization that I carry with me every day in my work.
Now, do you think it's easier for you now coming in as an outside consultant to give them that dose of truth versus being someone on the team on the inside and having to deliver that news?
Absolutely. To be clear, it shouldn't be that way. Somebody who lives in the house and is part of the family has a pretty strong and informed view on what's going wrong at the dinner table. I just visit and then I go home and I'm gone each day. It was my experience when I worked in a large corporate environment that the consultants had sometimes outsized influence. And even if they said something that we may be willing to say, that was given more weighting. And so there's probably some psychological factor at play there. But not only is it easier, I think it's also given more weight and better received in many cases from outside.
Now, do you think that's a thing when we're talking at the highest level of leadership? Is that an ego thing? Because they're the leader of the organization, it's easier to get that outside perspective and not take it from inside? Or what do you think that is?
Yeah, I could only speculate. I think that when you're managing a team, you're often seeing the entirety of that person and the trajectory of their performance, the ups and downs, where they're strong, where they have areas of development. And with an external advisor, you're bringing them in to solve one certain set of problems. And presumably you brought them in because they have credibility. They have experience, they have perspective, and they have the proven results that they've done it before and they can do it again. And I would guess that all of that blends together in an environment where maybe it's ego, but I think a lot of it is just the comparative nature of your own internal embedded team and this person that you've hired and given them the luxury of laser-like focus to look at one part of your business and help solve a big problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. The hired gun, he's a sniper there to just take out that one target. It's not the whole business. So you got to put more weight on that if you brought that person in and trust them, or else you wouldn't have brought them in, right?
Yeah. Not language I would use in my marketing materials. I'm not the sniper, but yes, I take your point. Well said.
What results are you most proud of?
Jonathan, the results I'm most proud of is, just the fact that I get to do this kind of work with businesses that don't have any comparative alternatives. If you're running a $30 million family-owned, multi-generational business, you can't go to the big 4 or big 5 consulting firms for support and integration. You don't have the luxury of the budget to do it, and frankly, you're not big enough to get their time anyways. And so that it just gives me a lot of joy every day and satisfaction and pride to be able to do that. But it's also deeply personal. So my wife and I both grew up in households that I wouldn't say we were broke, but let's say meager means. So while we were never either one of us ever at risk of missing a meal or not having a place to stay, there wasn't a lot of margin for error, and there were no safety nets. And there have been many chances or opportunities for us to have slipped through and had much more difficult lives than we lead now as adults. And so our results are our livelihood. And it contributes to us to being able to raise our children in a way that's stripped of a lot of the insecurity we experienced when we were growing up. So we don't spoil our kids, and we try to offer them a childhood that's materially different from their peers. But we've widened those margins, and that's just something that we're incredibly proud of.
Beautiful, man. Any parting thoughts you want to share with the results leaders who are listening to us right now?
Just one. So you had made a comment, or you mentioned the idea of playing a game without the scoreboard. And I think there's another take on that I think is really important. One of the things that I see that people spend a lot of time on is really getting deep into the data. right? And when it comes to results, it is about demonstrating progress and performance and impact. But if you're too myopically looking at the numbers, you're looking at them too frequently, you can kind of miss the greater value creation that's underway. And so I think a lot about trends over data. And so, yes, I want to hit our benchmarks. Yes, I want to be at the level of performance that we expect. But probably more important is, are we better today than we were yesterday? And for me, we've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at home. And when our daughter was born, the older one, I'm a numbers guy. I like to build models. I like to predict what's going to happen, monitor if it's happening, monetize the impact of what happened. And I was driving myself crazy trying to figure out if she was eating enough every day, every meal. And eventually the physician said, stop. You cannot determine if she's got proper nutrition and consumption on a meal by meal basis. You're going to drive yourself insane. I don't want you thinking about it meal by meal. I don't want you thinking about it day by day, maybe week by week, but probably even better. Why don't we look at her weight the next time she comes in next month? And if the trend is there's going to be times where she's going to eat more than she weighs. There's some times where she's not going to want to touch food and she's going to go to bed seemingly hungry, and it's not going to be a big deal. And so that always brings back to me the importance of trends over data. The scoreboard is important, absolutely. But if you spend all your time looking at the scoreboard, you're going to miss what's going on in the field. And so I think that's something that I would leave your listeners with as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, there is no question in my mind, our listeners are going to want more from you. So where can they get it?
You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter at MosherCG, and online at MosherCG.com.
We will have links in the show notes. Thank you for hanging out with us, Joe, and thank you for tuning in, Results Leaders. Another episode is in the can. That is a wrap for another edition of ResultsLeader.fm. If you are out there getting results for your clients and you want to be featured on the show, go to ResultsLeader.fm now and apply to be on the show. And if you love what you're hearing, share the show, give us a rating and review, do anything to help us get the message out there. Thought leadership is easy, but results leadership is hard. We'll catch you on the next one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.